budget study session. One agenda item, which is the operating budget, period. Mr. Villegas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is my distinct pleasure to be able to talk about the city's budget. And it's one that, I said last time, but I'll just reiterate it due to its importance, that this is truly one of the most important policy documents that the city puts together. It's all of our hopes, dreams, and ambitions baked into a single document. And so every time I talk about a budget, I always ask myself, is this right? Are we doing things for the right reasons, and is it for the common good? And so that leads my philosophy as we go through this. And so as we get started, I wanted to talk about revenue neutral, but less in words and more in math. And so I just want this at a minimum to serve as a refresher for what it means and for those that are in attendance so they can easily follow along with what I am saying. So in this scenario, and I'll just pull it up here, that for the total assessed valuations, that is set by the county. But this is a hypothetical situation for us, at least on this PowerPoint, that if the total assessed valuations was $1 million and the city's mill levy was 25, that would mean the city would collect $250,000 in property tax. Say in the following year, the council decided we want to keep revenue neutral. And in that following year, $1,300,000 was then the new total assessed valuation. To achieve revenue neutral, we would have to lower the city's mill levy, in this case, to 0.19 in order to reach the same $250,000 that was collected in the prior year. So we're in the revenue neutral scenario, you're always chasing last year's budget dollars. So in this case, if the council were to say we want a flat mill levy, and what actually sparked all of this was me talking with kind of lay folks that may not be involved in local government. They just assume that flat mill levy or revenue neutral were interchangeable. And so that's really why I wanted to do this. So in this case, the same total assessed valuation was $1 million. If our mill were 25, we collect $250,000. Again, assuming it goes up to 1.3 million. To keep it flat just means that you're going to use the mill levy from last year, keep it this year, and then our total property tax collection would go up slightly to account for the fact that the assessed valuations went up. So in the raised mill levy scenario, and actually I want to go back for a second. So due to the state statute as it's written, even if the council were to decide to say, let's keep it flat, we've then exceeded revenue neutral. So to the average person in the public, that's, oh no, the city is raising taxes. What are they doing? Well, we haven't raised taxes because we've kept our mill levy the same. So we've just banked on the assessed valuation increase, but we did not raise taxes in this scenario. And so again, keeping with the same math, if the assessed valuation went up to 1.3 million, and the council were to say, we need to raise the mill levy. Actually, raising the mill levy is you take our mill, and even if it were 0.26 or 0.251 or whatever math case would be baked into this, we've then raised the mill levy. And so in this hypothetical scenario, if it were the total assessed valuations of 1.3 million and the city had decided to go to 0.27, then our revenue would be about 100,000 over last year's. And so I just wanted that to be at a minimum a refresher, and for those watching or in attendance so they can easily follow along. As we really dig into this, I did want to take into account some of the regional cities that were around. So South Hutch, Mays, Mack, Newton, and Nickerson, I just polled what their mills were, and then also the total mill levy, because I also think that's important for these discussions. As you can see, we're the lowest, and why I picked these, generally speaking, you could say that maybe someone would want to move to these other communities if they said it was too expensive to live in Hutchinson. And just fast facts about the city's mill. I did look at all of the first-class cities in Kansas, and our mill of 40 is right around the middle. And then Hutchinson's total mill levy is around the upper third when you take into account all of the other taxing entities that are part of our community. And here's kind of the breakdown to help illustrate where all the property tax dollars go in relation to these cities and what they collect on a per dollar basis. So as we look at trends, what we've been seeing from, I just picked 2020 as a good jump off point. We could really go further, or 2021 or whatever, but really the data shows that it's climbing. And so this is just a quick poll on some of the soft costs and then on some of our tangible assets as well. And then to further kind of dig deep into the fact that the city is not static, in that we are growing in our assets. From 2014 to present day, we've added around 91 acres of parkland that we now maintain. Multi-use trails close to 11,000 linear feet, almost 73,000 or so square feet of building space has been added. And then in terms of park amenities, you have the splash pads, the bike park, disc golf courses, picnic tables, those other types of amenities at our parks. So we are growing. And as a council member Garza said, a really interesting trend, and one that I'm quite proud of, is that we are growing in our employee base. So if you look at 2023, we had a total vacancy of 54. So if you look at Public Works, we were down 21. If you look at Police, we were down 13 sworn officers. Dispatch, we were down 8. Parks, we were down 5. Fire, 1. And then I just kind of lumped it all together. At City Hall, IT, and Court, we were down 6. And then if you look across the bottom, we're now down 11. And that definitely speaks volumes to the culture that we're building here as an organization. And actually, it was a really good thing. Angela was sitting in on an interview and had asked someone that they were interviewing, what made you apply? And their response was, well, we heard the city is a great place to work. And so I think that is a kudos to the council and always being supportive of staff, and also a big kudos to our department heads and their teams in ensuring that people do want to work here. Going more on the macro level in terms of our tax base, it's basically been neutral. And then the same thing with our population. So in this case, whenever we've, say, had a vacancy show up, say in downtown, then somewhere on 30th we get a business that opens. And so it's kind of usually a wash. But that's usually at the macro level, it's kind of what we're seeing is it's, at least at that point, it's been static. And then for us as an organization, if we go from about 2020 to present day, you can see the reduction in the mill that we've done. And then that leads us to our current budget outlook. So this is just a snapshot in present day of where we're at. And so if you look at the bottom right, the ending fund balance for the 2026 budgeted, we are negative $873,000. And part of a lot of what is causing this is the fact that we are almost fully staffed. So it sounds funny, but we would typically bank on those salary savings to kind of get us out of the hole. And so as that pot has dried up, we don't really have that to help us out anymore. That's at least a large contributing factor to what's going on. And so as I've been working with Angela, one of the things that whenever I'm looking at a budget book, I usually like to look at what the structural balance is first. And for me, that's like a BMI. It can give you at least a rough idea of the overall health. And so as we can see, the two lines where it says the 48,022,884, and then right below that, the 43 million and change. Well, one is our revenue, and then the top one is our expenditures. And so that line just over time has separated, and we can take into account that just things have gone up, we're hiring more people, just construction cost, everything in its totality kind of gets baked into that divide. And the nature of really of our discussion for tonight will be how do you shrink that back? And so we're going to go over some strategies and tactics on how to do that, but I really wanted to call this out in particular. So when it came to the 26 cuts, probably at the start of budget, as Angela and I were working through everything, off of the total request from departments, it was around 5 million in the negative. And then as we continued to fine-tune, either make cuts or shift projects instead of having it in 26, maybe it can happen in 28. Looking at the MRF, what vehicles really need to be replaced and taking a really hard look at everything. We went from around 5 million to the negative 873,000 that you saw today. This right here was just a snapshot of the most recent cuts, and then what we had to do to get to that. But it generally shifted from cutting projects to then cutting kind of the more tangible tools that our employees need to be able to do their job. And admittedly, that part was what I didn't like the most. But I tried not to cut too much to where I'd be setting our employees up for failure. So I was trying to target more of the vehicles and other types of tangible assets. And as we're kind of going through this, I did want to take the opportunity to acknowledge a lot of the improvements that we've made to date. And so I could see this more of almost like an examination of conscience. Because whenever we talk budgets or anything like that, especially in today's society where it's fraud, waste, and abuse gets thrown out quite often, I really want to highlight that we're trying to really dig deep, scrape the bottom of the barrel, and really look at the services that we provide and how we provide them. And so I am going to go through each one to just spell them out because I don't want any of it to get missed. So residential streets were plowed for the first time last year, and the city did not go over the approved budget. And so that speaks to our efficiency, that speaks to our training, and everything that we've put into that. And so I really want to commend Public Works and what they've been able to accomplish by not even going over budget. And yet we've really tacked on and doubled or tripled their workload in some cases. And so that's really important to acknowledge that. We had an organizational assessment where we split Public Works into two separate departments to address the long-standing issues that we've seen across utilities and the Public Works functions. And by doing so, we were able to proactively reduce our reliance on consultants, potentially saving the city around $330,000. We're working very diligently to this day with the EPA and the state on trying to save an additional $575,000. That's coming from some of our wells that really they're at a non-detect level in terms of contamination, but the state is still wanting us to continue with that testing, but we're trying to build a case that it's not necessary anymore. And if we can get out of that, again, that would save $575,000. We've addressed public works and utilities staffing woes by enhancing incentives to encourage ideal response times during necessary overtime events. So think water main breaks or a tree falling in the road and we have to get it there at 3 in the morning, like what they did at this most recent storm, to clear the road. And so our hope with some of the callback time that we can encourage our employees to step up when necessary. So, and if we can pull that off, that would reduce some of our part-time staffing during the summer months. And so again, we're looking at efficiencies and really thinking about the work creatively and how we get that done. We've redesigned the annual street maintenance program to also include sidewalk and utility improvements to beautify neighborhoods holistically. And part of this, in working with our engineering staff, is to TV and take inventory of all of our underground stormwater assets. And so that's a first for the city to be able to do that and pull that off. And so again, I really want to commend all of our staff and the work that they're doing. We've moved the animal shelter and animal control over to the Parks Department to find some shared resources, kind of with the animals at the zoo and then the animals at the animal shelter, because that would also free up PD to focus on more traditional law enforcement matters. We've streamlined the parks operations to improve maintenance quality. And so we've split it into a north-south type of breakdown, where now we have a designated point of contact. So in some instances in the past, say if the park got mowed but then didn't get weed-eated, what did that handover look like and how come it didn't get weed-eated? Now, as we shift to this, we have a more, it's smaller, easier to focus. You can get your hands on it, so you can focus on more of that detailed work. And we also have a lot of landscaping at our parks and just around City Hall generally. So what would it look like to contract out some of that work so it can continue to stay nice and we can focus more on some of the lawn care. And we've revised the zoo master plan to correct for some of the missed opportunities by hoping to at least tap into if we can get more exotic animals that could encourage ridership on the train, hopefully generate more revenue so we can continue to keep the zoo free, or at a minimum at least free for Reno County residents. And we're currently relocating IT staff to City Hall. The present IT building resides in the floodplain and has flooded in the past. The relocation can result in property, insurance, and maintenance savings. And then just kind of one final note on staffing. In 23, the response times for dispatch were around 1.5 to 2 minutes. And the current response time is 3.6 seconds for 97% of the calls. And I really attribute a lot of that to Kevin and his leadership, and not only beefing up our staffing levels, but also a very impressive training regimen for our staff. And so I'd highlight, and there's probably more that we could, but it wasn't just let's knock down the atrium. It wasn't just we're going to go for these flashy things. It was really trying to rework and retool how we do business for the city of Hutchinson. And so I wanted to make that very clear in this. On the public works and public safety side, again, just to highlight the important work that the city does and how it touches the entire county. I think these are some facts that many people don't know. So the fire department is responsible for 107 square miles. And to put that into perspective, Hutch is just less than 25 square miles. Public Works is responsible for the levee, traffic signal, and emergency siren maintenance and upkeep for South Hutch. And the city also maintains the levee for Willowbrook for larger capital needs. And then dispatch provides 911 service for the entire county. And so to really go into the budget and think about the separation, that graph I showed you on expenditures and revenues, would be to propose a 2 mil increase for 26, and that would alleviate and correct that $873,000 deficit but it could also give us the ability to beef up our fund balance. As we were working with our auditors, they had expressed that at least this year we missed the bullet, but our bond rating could have gone down. And that's something that we need to be taking very seriously, because if our bond rating goes down, that would have implications that whenever we do bond a project, it would be at a higher interest rate. So depending on what that interest rate could mean, that could, for us, at least adjust how many projects we try to tackle in a given year, because it would just make everything that much more expensive. So in this case, we do get favorable 4 to 5% interest rates. Potentially, maybe that could go to 6. I'm not really sure. But in any event, we don't want that to be affected. So what this could look like for the average resident and business, we just picked a couple of numbers, but you can certainly scale that up or down. So if you had a $100,000 home, assessed value home, what that would mean for you is that it would be the equivalent to an additional $23 a year that you would pay to the city. And if you had a $400,000 home, it would be $92 a year. And if you had a commercial business, it would be about $500 a year. This part here is really taking a two-pronged approach, and I could probably spend the vast majority of my time on this, but I do want to allow for Q&A, especially as we look at what the storm is going to do tonight. But from the time I got here to present day, it's been very healthy for me to go through an entire budget cycle. So I can kind of see the ebbs and flows, where the money is going, how it's being spent, what are we relying on, all of those things. As I really took a deep dive and I'm looking at that graph and how do we bring that back to, how do we get it closer together? The way we do it, we're overly reliant upon the mill levy. In other words, we're overly reliant on property taxes to kind of pay for everything that we do. While we do have sales tax and fines and fees and other forfeitures, the vast majority of what we're relying on is property taxes for all of our capital projects. And if we take this approach, and I have a lot of case studies to kind of show why this would be advantageous for the city, it would be proposed that the sales tax would go towards street improvements, parks and recreation, and stormwater improvements. And as part of the stormwater improvements would be to eliminate the current stormwater utility fee. And I want to add in here that a lot of these expenses are very high. And so if we can shift, say, street maintenance, so it doesn't have to be subsidized by the general fund anymore. If we can shift that burden to now the sales tax, that then frees up the general fund so we can then pay for ballistic gear, scuba gear for our firefighters, all those things. So there's a lot of tangible benefits by removing a lot of the burden that is placed on the general fund. So some of the benefits, and it's a little quirky, but some pay the stormwater utility fee, and then others do not. A lot of that is predicated on whether or not there's a water bill attached to the property. And so there are some limitations with respect to construction. And so what I mean by that is with the current fee as it's designed. Say if we know that there's a underground stormwater pipe that needs to be replaced, but we don't have money to fix the road. Theoretically, we could dig up the road, replace the pipe, but then we have no money to backfill to fix the road, because we can't use the stormwater fee to build back the road. And so it's kind of quirky that way, but that's just the way it works with the fee. And so shifting to a tax can make that more generalized and that problem goes away. And it does consume staff time from our engineering staff to finance on making sure that the ERUs are correct and accurate, and sometimes misses happen. But this would allow us to be more proactive towards street maintenance. We have additional monies we would have additional monies to really ramp up our production on that. Obviously, there would be the quality of life improvements, and then just proactively addressing the city's budget for future years is the one that I really lean on the most. And so in terms of case studies, I'm at least calling Salina, Garden City, and Dodge City peer cities. The reason why I picked those, one, they're rural. They're not really close to any large metropolitan area, and they offer very similar services that we do. So think airport, zoo, golf course, etc. Now, some of these municipalities have an electric department, but they may not have an animal shelter or something like that. But generally speaking, we're about pretty close. And I picked these also because they have a dedicated sales tax, kind of what I'm inferring now. And so I kind of highlighted specifically that for Salina, they have a 3/4 cent sales tax dedicated to street maintenance. And it's 92% of the 3/4 cent is dedicated to streets. The rest went to downtown and then economic development. So I spent a lot of time reviewing these, their budgets, their CIPs, and kind of what they're working on and what they're doing. That was implemented back in 2016, and so I just kind of took a snapshot of their mill levy, and then you can kind of see that they're significantly lower than us. So that stood out to me. Garden City, I wasn't really able to track down when their dedicated sales tax for streets went into effect, but their mill is also lower than us because they're able to, again, shift that burden away from the general fund. Dodge City, theirs was quite impressive, a 1/2 cent for street maintenance. It was also for utility work as well, and property tax relief. That was implemented in 22. Their 10-year average was around 44 mil, and they've been able to responsibly lower that to 36. And then I went and looked at cities that I would consider non-peer. Either they're just very larger than us, don't offer similar services, but they still offer street maintenance, parks, and all those things. So that's why it's still appropriate to at least compare what they're trying to accomplish. Olathe, they have a 3/8 cent sales tax dedicated to street maintenance, sidewalks, curb and gutter. That was implemented in 2005. And then they recently added on for park maintenance as well back in 23. And the thing that's extremely impressive about Olathe, and while I did take the 10-year average, it's around 24 mil. If you go back roughly 20 years, it's been consistently around that. They found a way to stabilize their mill levy. They either kept it flat, sometimes it went a little above, sometimes it went a lower, but generally speaking, it kind of evened out to be around 24. Granted, if you look at their assessed valuation, they do grow, so they can always adjust for that growth in assessed valuation. But it still goes back to the fact that they have less burden that's taxed on the general fund. Overland Park, the same story as Olathe. When they implemented their 3/8 cent sales tax in 98, you can kind of see where their mill levy is in comparison, how they've been able to just kind of ride the ship now that not as much of the burden is on the general fund. And I would say out of all of these, Derby has a very impressive website for when they were doing a lot of their educational component, for when they went for their 1 cent sales tax increase. So I would certainly encourage everyone in this room and anyone listening to look at Derby's website. But they went for, and it was passed, a 1 cent sales tax for streets, parks, and public safety. On the public safety side, that was to fund equipment and vehicles and stuff like that. So it was less on operations per se, but more on the tangible assets. And they've been able to lower their mill as a reflection of that. And when they went for the 1 cent, they did advertise that as, this is going to be the result of trying to lower the mill. And again, in doing it in a responsible fiduciary manner. So as we go through, there are many scenarios that we could go through, but I just stuck with at least the big three. but you can always split the difference one way or the other. But if we were to go the revenue neutral scenario, meaning from present day and then out in the out years up to 29, what revenue neutral would bring the city. And so again, if you look at the bottom right in bold, that would mean negative 21 million. Obviously, we wouldn't let it get to that, but to avoid that would be, again, substantial cuts and true impacts in our level of service, assuming nothing else were to change. In the flat mill levy scenario, it would, the bottom right, negative 14 million. So just as we keep this in the back of our mind, if we go to the proposal of the 2 mill levy and sales tax increase scenario, in the bottom right is when we can finally turn the ship on our budget. So if you go into the out years, it would be 3 million, which when we work with our bond counsel, one of the things that they want to see, even if it were, say, less than ideal, because within our fund balance, the goal is around 7 million plus or minus. But if we're less than that and we can demonstrate that we have a plan, maybe they'd be more inclined to work with us instead of kind of taking a hit on our bond rating. So this is not only important for the city's just finances and getting the burden of all of our operations off of the property tax, but also just financially for the city to make sure that our interest rate remains low. And I should note that this forecast here assumes that in 27, 28, 29 that the mill levy would stay flat. So before I turn to questions, I am going to go back to this graph here, and I'm going to have Angela come up to kind of talk historically about how we got here. Because one of the things that I don't want to happen is to anyone feel like they have to blame themselves for this. I don't think that's fair, because there's a lot of things outside of us that we can control. You can't control inflation going up, insurance going up 39%, how to adjust for that. Some of that, you know, were any of us being advised properly as we were making these decisions. So I don't want anyone to feel like they have to blame themselves for this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Angela.
Good evening, Council. Angela Richard. So Enrico wanted me to do a little bit of history, and I thought this graph showed how we got here, a good representation. Back in 2021, our mill levy was 44.462. At that time, we ended 21 with a general fund balance of 9.5 million. Then in 22, our mill levy was about the same, and we ended with 9 million in our general fund. Fast forward to 23, we dropped the mill levy to 41.556. And I believe the thought was that we were getting our general fund balance high enough that we should lower the mill levy to give our citizens and residents some relief from property tax. So we did that, and we still ended 23 with 10.2 million. But looking forward to 24, we see that line for the expenditures go above the line for revenues. And what happened there is we again lowered the mill to 40.331. And we also saw our vacancies, like our budget versus actual, go down 823,000. So we had this shift where people started to think the city was a good place to work, and we started to get fully staffed or close to it. And what happens when you have people in those spots? You can get stuff done. And what do people need to get stuff done? Materials. So we see this, a good example of this in the street department. You hire more staff, you need more material to fill potholes. You're getting stuff done. And so we also saw at that time, a compounding inflation. Enrico gave you those examples. And so that's where we're getting this upside down now, where our expenditures are exceeding our revenues. And I feel like at this point, we've looked at the budget enough. Yes, we could go back and nickel and dime. We could make people cut training and the travel with the training. But I don't think it's going to be enough to correct that. So that's where Enrico has presented some options for you. And so either we would have to go back and affect our service levels with our expenses, or look at his options, or some combination. So that's kind of a look back, and I'll let Enrico answer questions now.
What are the assessments, the property assessment increase going to be this year?
Do you have those numbers with you?
Yeah.
I know that the new mill is around 397,000. Do you know what last year's was?
So the property valuation went up, it's in your packet on page 4. The property valuation went up 4.54%.
Is this packet online?
It is not.
Okay. Will this be posted online?
Yeah, we'll post it.
Thank you.
One more question for Angela, or maybe 5. Refresh my memory on, I'm one of those guys that on the stormwater utility fee, I have 2 properties that don't have any water service. So I get a separate bill for my fee and I pay it. The people, if we would have a sales tax and get rid of it, are the people that have never paid it going to have to pay it?
They'd pay
Not
sales
going
tax.
forward, but you mean like
Yeah,
what's
would they
still owed?
eventually still owe?
Like what we do right now is we send them to collections, but if we don't have good contact information, it's hard for collections to track them down. So I imagine we wouldn't be able to pull those back, but that's a discussion we could have and find out what's possible and what the council wants.
Okay, and then the average water bill, I mean, mine runs $40-50. How much is a stormwater utility fee on that? And I'm so sorry, I don't really pay that much attention.
So a residential is just 1 ERU, which is engineering terms per unit. And they get charged $4.75 a month for residential. Commercial engineering actually calculates the ERUs, and then we take that times the 475.
Thank you.
So our mill levy is what now, Rico, right now?
Exact 40.3 and change, plus or minus.
40.3. Now,
Yeah.
you're suggesting we go raise it to 2 mills, right?
Correct,
So that put us at 45, am I right?
42,
42.
which is still 2 less than a couple of years ago.
Is it good business practice to raise it for 42 one year and then we get back in the saddle again, have a budget of $3 million? But that's for a couple of years. That's all the way up to 29 that you figure, right?
Correct. I mean, we could have probably have kept going, but that seemed like at least a proof of concept to at least go out a few years to show what that would do. And for us and just the financial hardship that we're in right now, I believe we have to go those 2 routes in order for at least this graph here, you can kind of squeeze it back together. But again, there's a combo probably that we could do. We'd have to play with the numbers significantly. But that's why I'm also kind of bringing this to your attention now. So we have a little over a month for us to at least refine this and tweak it more. But a little embarrassed to say how many hours I put into this thing, but I think it's at least our best shot.
To give you another piece of tidbit is from 2014 to 2021, we were over 43 mills. We were in the 44 mills for about 5-6 years there.
What years?
2014, from 2013 to 2014, we bumped up from 41.5 basically to 43.23. And then we were between 43 and 44 up until 2021, and then we lowered down in 2022.
In your calculations here, you're considering it mentally, the sales tax, but you've not put numbers to that. I mean, I know the sales tax is a ways out,
Sure.
if it happens. I mean, it has to be voted on by all county residents and.
This would just be Hutchinson residents, because it's a city-specific sales tax. Within these scenarios, they make several assumptions that staff get at least a 4.5% pay raise, inflation up at least 2.5%. We're fully staffed. I mean, this is like all in. So this isn't just a portion of, but like everything.
Including the sales tax.
Yeah,
That
that's
hadn't been voted on yet.
that's everything that would be baked into this.
Okay.
So he shows 3 scenarios, which is revenue neutral, flat mill, and then the 2 mill with the sales tax. So the 2 missing, or there's a couple missing, which would be the revenue neutral or the flat mill with sales tax combos. So there's multiple ways to kind of run the numbers here. But if you look at the 2 I just mentioned, you're still arriving somewhere in between the negative 14 million or the negative 21 million and the positive 3 million. So, like, essentially, the revenue neutral scenario is the worst case scenario of numbers that you could run. The best case scenario is, 2 mil levy increase with a sales tax combo. Does that sum it up?
That is correct. Yeah, it was a good summary. And if we did say the 2 mil levy increase and then without the sales tax, we're still in the negatives. I mean, that's just where we're at.
So the stormwater fee, as you mentioned, I think you used the word quirky, but it's limited in scope by statute, which is looking back to the 2015 ordinance that put it into place. And in it, we didn't define the list of projects that would be completed with it, but what it does define is, sorry, that was gross. The process by which we take it in and the process by which we take it out. And it says in there essentially that we can offset stormwater projects with other like general funds or operating budget, but we can't use stormwater funds on other projects, which is the scenario that you talked about earlier. So the stormwater fee kind of handicaps us with what we can use those funds for. A sales tax scenario, regardless of what number we arrive at if we move forward with considering like putting this to a final vote to residents. But any funds that are taken in would also be limited in scope by what we ask the public to vote on. But it would be a little bit more flexible because you would be generally ascribing it to roads, to different pockets of money, if you will.
Absolutely. And to touch on that last point, it would be my recommendation that, because some cities, they end up handicapping themselves when they go for a sales tax, where they say, we just want this for capital projects, but then they don't think about the operating expenses that are attributed to that. With this, I would propose it can be used for capital projects and offsetting operational expenses. So it's a more all-encompassing sales tax than just one or the other. And what I've seen too, and I would not want us to fall into this camp, again, being fiduciary and very conscientious of taxes, whereas some cities, they go for a sales tax initiative, and I'll just say a community center. You know, a lot of communities want those, and they build a really big, robust community center. And then as the sales tax is about to sunset, then they kind of it'll dawn on themselves, oh wait, how are we going to pay for this? Like once the sales tax runs out, how are we going to pay for the lighting? Who's going to staff it? And so then really what happens is the sales tax never falls off. And so when we go into this, I want to assume that I would propose at least a 10-year to start. So that would give the city plenty of time to prove ourselves that we would be good stewards of the tax dollars. And if we get the feeling one way or the other that it may not get renewed, then we know that we're still safe because we're not out buying luxurious things. We're just taking care of what we have, and we're going to try to do it well. So I don't want us to fall into that camp of we build all these new things, and then we're like, oh wait, what are we doing here? So a little more context there.
Do you have any information on the other municipalities? You don't have to change slides, but
Yeah.
especially the long-term ones like Olathe, who's had theirs on since 16. And I think one of them maybe
Yeah, I
just
think it was
changed
one was like
slides, so-
98. And
Yeah.
then- yeah.
Overland Park since 98. Were
Mhm.
any of theirs set to sunset and were renewed, or were theirs put in as evergreen taxes?
A lot of them, it's like 10 years or 20 years. There was some sunsets, and then it looks like others were kind of in perpetuity. But really, the council would always have the authority and discretion to be able to get rid of those. But that's in kind of reading the literature, that's what I found, is some was 10, 5, 20. It's kind of a mixed bag.
So if we look at the obviously, like, this is talking about the operating budget is very much like personal to Hutch. But if we look at the environment in which we're operating, which is the state of Kansas, we had two bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, that the House bill was 3% cap on assessed valuations, I believe, and it died. And then the one in the Senate was a 6% rolling average, and it also died. But the presumption is that those bills are going to come back. The fiscal note on both of them essentially said we have no idea how this will impact schools and every taxing entity in cities and counties in the state. But here it is. And so moving forward, the revenue neutral is new enough that I think we've just wrapped our minds around it as a cities and taxing entities have just wrapped their minds around how it operates. They've made some tweaks, but it is possible that this is an opportunity that we have to go after an increase. And then we're in a position where we can at least remain flat for potentially 4 or 5 years. Whereas if we don't do this now, it's almost as if we sit and we wait too long, and we actually are going to dig ourselves into a financial hole, considering that the state could put further limitations on our taxing ability, or the assessed valuations, if you will, but it trickles down to impacting us. And then we're looking at being $14 to $21 million in the hole, having our credit downgraded, which just makes the cost of business increase even further, on top of the operating costs of 30% increase of health insurance, 2%, 2.5% of inflation, and the list goes on and on. So I'm not saying right now for or against, but I think the bigger picture is something that we still have to take into consideration. We're not operating in a vacuum.
And it should be noted too that we haven't finalized the policy, but we're still looking at a property tax abatement for seniors that qualify. So that is still very much on the table. We still plan to implement that. The mayor had asked some great questions. We just haven't circled back to that yet. But that is something still on the back burner. So I don't want that to get lost in all of this either.
Who is our current insurance carrier? Health insurance?
I'll turn it over to
Travelers.
the
Travelers,
insurance
okay.
stuff.
Yes.
And how long have we had that contract?
It's annual.
But how long have we been with them?
Well, we've changed, currently, it's about 3 years with Travelers. We had one Beacon for a period of time before that. There's only 2 or 3 carriers that provide the insurance that we need. And then prior to the 3 or 4 years with one Beacon, it was also Travelers.
And so are they our property and casualty, or are they our health insurance for our employees?
Can't tell you about health insurance, but property and casualty, actually, part of that is with Chubb Insurance this year.
Okay.
And then our other coverages for, we have a number of different types of liability coverage. Those are with Travelers.
And those are being shopped out every single year.
Yes, we have an independent insurance agent that checks the entire market.
So
To answer about health insurance, I'm not going to claim to be the expert here, but we use Aetna. It's administered by Meritain. I believe we went to them in like 16 or 17. And I have been talking with Renee. I know she is looking at whether that is, you know, a good price or not, and whether to shop that. She has made changes to our prescription insurance that are saving us a lot of money right now. And she continues to explore that.
yeah, thank you.
I will say too that we haven't really explored it much, but we are looking at whether we want to maintain our self-insured status, and what does it look like to switch. So I want to throw that out there. I mean, really a lot is on the table to try to balance out some of those rising costs. So.
I think the conversation around the sales tax, to circle back to that, is, like you said, that it does lessen the burden on our taxpayers. You're essentially taking one and swapping it for another. But I think the sales tax more evenly spreads it, because like you said, the stormwater fund is, not only is it difficult to use, or not as flexible as we want, but it's not being applied evenly. It's expensive to administer. And a sales tax, even though the people who live locally will say they're the only ones who have to pay it and they'll be the loudest voices, at least if I go shopping, I've never looked up a city's tax rate. You just go and do your thing, and if it's 8
I do.
you're buying different things than I am probably. But like if you're just going shopping, you know, it's 8% and 8.75 one place, 9.25 at another. You're probably not making a clothes shopping trip or a diaper run based off of changing that up based on your tax rate. I think it also ensures, like I said earlier, ensures the financial security for the city, and the financial diversification for the city, because this potentially would give us I hate to say slush fund, because I think there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse that's associated with that, but it gives us a lot more flexibility and a funding option to use for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because there is so much to say that I almost forgot that even if we were to go up, say to even 9%, that we're still kind of well below some of our peers. I've seen some as high as like 10.5. So I didn't capture that in here, but you can see, at least say with Salina, they have some special benefit districts like a CID or something, so the sales tax in that area would be higher to account for that. So that's why it's kind of 9.25 to 11.25. But we'd still be lower relative to a lot of our peers. So that's still something to talk about.
When do we have to have this announced to the state that we have our budget? Is it in August?
July 20th.
Yeah,
When?
July 20th.
Second reading.
I don't know, I've been a city council member since 2020, and this is the hardest thing. I hate budget time, but this is the biggest thing we have to do every year. So that's where I get all my white hair from.
I'm going to catch you pretty soon, I can tell you that.
I don't want to hear it from either one of you.
Didn't you lose the hair?
You know, it's interesting looking historically, looking at going back all the way to 2016, 2017, our total expenditures were about 115 million in 2016 and 2017. And then we've been floating around, depends on what year, but 105 to 115 million in the last 3 years on total expenditures. And we've had 21% national inflation from 21 through 24. I mean, there's been a lot of, I reckon, there's been a lot of work to try to go thin to win in certain areas, and I think we need to recognize that. That doesn't mean we need to stop looking for ways to be smart, but it also, we've got to make it work. We got to make the numbers add up. I don't see how we can move forward without doing some type of adjustment to the mill levy and the sales tax aspect. I'm fine with the sales tax. I mean, that's a voluntary tax. People choose to spend money.
Right.
Some of the issues I've had with the stormwater, one of the things I liked about the stormwater fee is it didn't matter whether you were tax exempt or not. You had a property getting a water bill, you were paying a stormwater fee. And I know we have a lot of properties in town that don't generate tax.
Mm-hmm.
Going at the sales tax, it's based off of how people spend money, and that doesn't necessarily mean Hutchinson residents only.
I mean, everybody who comes into Hutch is potentially going to be investing in Hutch, driving on our roads, investing in Hutch, spending money here. It splits it across.
Correct. And it's hard to compare between communities without looking at, I mean, I look at Salina all the time, and you look at their mill levy rate. If you take the assessed valuation of the mill levy rate and you figure out the percentage, the ratio's difference, we're about even on money generated between the two. The only one that's not on there that I know we compete against mostly on, not necessarily on smaller items, but on larger items where sales tax becomes an issue is Wichita. I mean, it's tough to beat that 7.5%.
Yeah.
They're having this exact same conversation.
Oh, yeah, they've had a lot of
Yeah.
big issue budget problems. Yeah, no, I see it on the news. But, you know, the COVID hangover has caused a lot of budgets to do this.
Yeah, and, you know, to your point, the COVID funds, the ARPA funds, how much did we have on Woody Seat? 1.5 million?
Do you know how much?
Yeah, 3-something, wasn't it?
And that was a huge, I
That's a
mean,
big
that's
chunk
a
of
good
it.
chunk off our budget. That was great.
Yeah,
Won't have that again.
right.
Well, you know, this is gonna get out tomorrow before you guys start screaming at us. Remember, we get paid really well to make these decisions, so.
Garza was telling me earlier we should go with 3 mills instead of just 2.
Shit, don't put that out there.
We'll take it, Garza.
No. There'll
We
be a
got
tree with
a
my
4%
on
raise
it.
last year too. 4%,
I
zero.
got 6. I got
the-
a 6% raise.
Well, so, I mean, it comes down to, we got to get our revenues to match expenditures, and are we at a point where, I mean, what can you cut and still offer the same services? And amenities.
Yeah, I will
And
say
maintenance.
that, to be the bad guy here, but I'm putting on my fiduciary hat. Within the proposed CIP, is to add or build Grace Harbor Park for around 500,000. And really, my question for the council: do we really need another park? I would love to just kind of ask you this, but we have to do it in a public meeting. So just rip the Band-Aid off. I really think that's something we should evaluate. That it kind of blew my mind on the acreage as we've expanded. my understanding is that there were some promises made to a neighborhood, but I would always lean on, now we know more information than we knew before. So as the facts change, the circumstances can change. So I just throw that out there. I don't need an answer right now, but at least think about it.
I think you're going to get differing opinions on parks and sidewalks and code enforcement and all those things.
Yeah.
And they all play into each other on how our long-term costs are affected. I'll give you an answer right now. I think we have more park space per capita than most communities. I think we should do better with what we have, or have fewer acreage, more amenities. Because it's more maintenance, the more parks. And we've gotten into, maybe not recently, but in the past, I think we've had a mindset of expanding our city limits without really taking into consideration what that means
Right.
for long-term costs.
Right.
And I've also seen situations where people want to donate property to the city, and it's not really taking into consideration what that cost is long-term, because it's double.
Right.
It's property that's not generating property tax, and it's costing maintenance. And those are things I don't think have been really thought through in the past. I think it's important. Well, and then also, and this is just how things work. Once we annex property that was in the county, we maintain it. But those property owners still pay the same amount of property tax to the county. So now it's on us, but the owners pay more.
Right.
And those are things to take into consideration.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the annexation piece, because it's not necessarily an improvement, but it helps shape the decision-making of trying to squeeze those two lines together. That's where the trying to be aggressive with the annexation is coming from for certain key properties that could really help offset our budget woes as well.
Well, and it's about value density within the city limits that helps us
Absolutely.
with our mill levy rates and overall taxation, because the more we can get per unit block, it's the same amount of maintenance generally, same amount of roads, same amount of infrastructure, but generating more value to the community. And the city's designed to be 60,000 people. It just stopped growing in 1980. Because you got to grow the city, you got to grow the infrastructure faster than the population growth.
Right.
And that's kind of been our issue. Okay, I'm done. So you want the soapbox?
No, thank you, I do enough so
To give you at least a little bit of guidance, because we do have to have, I mean, answers to you within 30 days on the budget, and that includes the CIP and the MRF. I had printed out the CIP and MRF document at the last meeting, and I went through every page and essentially wrote yes and no on some of them. And I will tell you that the easy no's for me, unfortunately, it is in the Parks Department, and it's the Green Street Park and the Grace Harbor Park. Because I believe the golf master plan was at 0. Okay. And they just happen to be alphabetical there. And I love parks. But I think those are, and then the Harsha Park development. Those are the improvements that putting them off doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, does it not give the benefit? Yeah, but it doesn't hurt anybody the same way that not investing in an existing building or replacing existing equipment to current standards has potential harm. So those are the easy no's for me. And there were a handful of others. I actually left that document on my desk, but the easy yeses in the SIP and the CIP and the MRF is like pretty much everything that's water and sewer, the facilities, the lines, the treatment plants, etc. But neighborhood pool planning, there was a water planning or pool planning one ask also. Those are no's from me.
One of the things that, as we talk water, it's actually very interesting. So we'll know that at some point we're going to be talking utility rate increases to account for the large expenditures that we're going to have to undertake. The fascinating thing here that as our engineering team was looking into grant opportunities to help offset some of our costs, our utility bills, our water and sewer, aren't even high enough to qualify for grants that could help offset construction projects for low-income individuals. And so the rationale there is that because we don't charge enough to maintain our system, why should they help us if we don't even care to keep it up to standards ourselves? And so it's kind of fascinating that way that we don't charge enough to even qualify for a grant. So, but there's going to be more to come on that. I just consider that a teaser.
Now, Rick, I'm gonna talk directly to you on this
Yeah.
one, all right? You have a lot of guts. I've never seen a city manager go public. I've been here a long time. I usually see, we have these discussions behind doors, but you have gone public on your ideas. That's a lot of guts. And I appreciate you. That shows a leader.
Well, that's why I'm going to have gray hair pretty soon too.
That shows a leader, sir. And it's not just our problem, it's the public's problem you brought out today. And you said, and you showed them your game plan, which you're gonna change a lot of things in the way the city's ran. I've never seen that done before. So you gave us your ideas, you went public on TV. I mean, man, that shows a lot of leadership, and I appreciate that. You know, it doesn't just become our problem like it used to be. We used to sit in a room back there and, oh, the public's not gonna like this. Well, the public sees what's gonna happen, what we gotta do. So I appreciate you doing this, man. And that shows a leader.
No, I appreciate that. And I think too, as we, just from the public's eye, if you will, you know, when they hear about the conversation and what's going on, it's usually going to be, oh, the fraud, waste, and abuse are like certain positions, right? One that gets talked about is like our communications team and what they're trying to accomplish. And to really stand up for them, the community said that we're not transparent. The community said that we're not doing anything to engage. We just had an evening meeting. When we have multiple evening meetings to hear from people, and we're constantly putting material out on social media. And one of the things that actually had a very involved citizen, we went to coffee recently, and we were talking about snow and how appreciative that they were that we plowed their snow for the first time. And one of the things that you would think there was like almost equal weight was the fact that we advertised what we were going to do before we did it. And you know, just capturing that, that this is what we're going to do, and then we did it. That little thing was something that really moved them because they've never experienced that before. And, you know, whether it's cut this position or cut that position, that's not going to dig us out of the hole anyway. So if we can really talk real solutions, it has to be beyond just one or two positions. So.
Well, you did good today. I'm not gonna sleep tonight, but that's okay. I'll go to work
I
tomorrow.
probably won't either. So.
I appreciate your graph that shows this. And, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, at what point are we bankrupt as a city? Because we don't do anything, or we just say, man, make it work, Enrico. You know,
Make it work, do more with less.
yeah.
Don't
that-
cut services, don't raise taxes.
Yeah, yeah,
Keep everything the same.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing too is like, just to get it all out there, as I was kind of going through these cuts, they certainly don't happen in a vacuum. I meet with the department head team and oftentimes kind of frontline supervisors and such to say like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. What do you think about making these cuts? I certainly got to a point where it was like demoralizing myself. You know, when you start cutting projects, that's easy, or shifting a project from one year to another. But to say, hey, you're not getting a police vehicle or this, like it, you know, I'm like, man, I'm kind of setting them up for failure by taking away the things that they need. So that weighed on me substantially when I'm like, we got to do something different because it can't be a rat race every single year. So.
I won't ask a why question because it immediately puts people on the defensive, but how do we come up with a stormwater utility fee where we can fix a stormwater problem under the surface, but we can't fix it all using that fund? How does that happen in government? I just sit here and in the 3.5 years just wonder how that ever comes about.
I don't know if I don't have the answer to that one. That's why I'd like to get out of that system, you know, of
Yeah, for
having
sure.
more flexibility because we can certainly recognize the limitations. And so then it's trying to correct that. Because we know that stormwater and tackling stormwater is very important. So if we can shift to something that's better, I'd prefer to do that than stick with this is a little broken.
Well, I think that it was probably the stormwater fee met our anticipated needs at the time and seemed great, but 10 years later, looking back, has it worked? Actually, I mean, we have this money and we haven't spent it, right? Like, we have these projects that we wanted to do, and how much of it have we spent?
I think we were saving a bunch of it for the Cow Creek
We've just
deal.
been sitting on it.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're,
But yet, when it was put into place, I think it was just very poorly designed at the time. That the forethought wasn't quite there. Like, we had these projects that we wanted to do. We've been waiting on the right time, the right everything, but yet we've had the funds for the most part. I know it took time to build, but
we had nothing before.
Come on
that.
in.
no, I know.
I
know. We were
didn't, I
taking the
really
money
didn't want to go down this
take
rabbit
money.
hole, but it's a discussion more about government and how do we not make these mistakes?
But to your point, people are gonna watch this and say, hell yeah, kill the stormwater fee. That sucks. Get rid of it. The trade-off is we have to replace it with something else because we can't take that money out of our operating budget as we see.
Of course. I guess I understand
Because
that.
we're not gonna be able to, even if we did the 2 mil increase, we're not gonna be able to accomplish the stormwater projects that we need, plus the things that go along with it, like putting the road back on top of the pipes.
No, I understand
So if we
that.
can't change say we can't change the sales tax, do we have to reinvent this to some other type of fee? Is that something that can be done to where it's more inclusive to fixing the road on top as well, or is that something we have to?
But I think that's relatively just a legal question at that point, and it'd be Paul who'd resolve that. But I've taken a little time in the past month or so with the help of Justin to learn a little bit more about the origins of the stormwater fee so that I could understand what was the intent. And the more that I've learned about it, the more that I realized it was actually a fairly thoughtful process. They had a whole stormwater advisory committee that sat down and reviewed the kind of projects that we thought we needed based on our stormwater master plan, and then they developed the fee off of that. But one of the key components that I realized that was part of that plan is that even back then, they realized the scale of these projects is way more than any fee that we could ask the citizens of Hutchinson to pay. So a big part of the problem, or a big part of the program was going to be seeking like the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Assistance Programs, which is a fairly substantial grant program that can cover up to 75% of a project's costs. And at the time, I think they were sitting with $90 million worth of projects in the stormwater master plan. And there would have been no way for them to do that without that sort of assistance. So we applied for the FEMA HMA on, I think it was Second and Cleveland, which is like a $10 or $15 million project. And it didn't go through, and I'm not sure why. So I think at that point, we had to take a step back and say, okay, so if this component of our strategy isn't necessarily reliable, what do we do next? And at the time, we had a single project that was sort of the keystone, the Cow Creek project. So we were focusing on that, but at the same time, the Cow Creek project is substantially more expensive than we could afford right now, just out of the fund. So I think what we need to do in the city is perhaps reset, consider what can we fund, either with the stormwater fee or some equivalent out of the sales tax, and what's a realistic strategy, particularly if there are questions about the longevity of federal FEMA funding. Because ultimately, we don't want to just be hoarding cash for decades before we're able to tackle any of these projects. That doesn't do anyone any good. So do we right-size it and tackle smaller projects? Do we look to self-perform some of the parts of those bigger projects? Those are some of the things we've been debating as alternatives to paying cash for those when we simply don't have that as an option.
And the stormwater funds that are in there are still going to be used. They've been earmarked for stormwater fees or stormwater projects. My understanding is that because I read the stormwater plan and the ordinance, we have some flexibility because the plan is a plan that can be amended based on engineering's discretion, essentially.
Correct.
So when I asked you questions about Cow Creek and March, the question was, are we doing Cow Creek or not, essentially? And you're like, yeah, probably not to that scope that was in the plan 10 years ago, but still needs some work.
It does. We still need Cow Creek to handle the sort of modifications to the floodplain that were agreed were a priority in the Stormwater Advisory Committee. But it's sitting at a $7 million price tag right now. And we don't even have that much money in the stormwater reserve right now. So we could tackle parts of it, or we could look to downsize it, but paying for that project as now envisioned isn't within our capability. And I think, based on what Enrico showed, it's not necessarily an option to pay for the rest of the project from other parts of the city, because we don't have those funds there either. So we're looking at potentially doing something late summer, early fall, revisiting those projects, reprioritizing them, talking about options to see if we can fit them into like a 20-year plan for stormwater in the city.
And we have new FEMA maps coming out.
We do. They're supposed to be out, but I haven't seen them yet. They were supposed to be presenting sometime this month, but I haven't heard anything yet.
Are these going to be good FEMA maps or bad FEMA maps? Okay, fair enough. That's a very honest answer, and I appreciate it.
Sorry.
That's the perfect word for it, too. I think the overarching question would be then if we were to put it to vote for sales tax, and it doesn't happen, what's Plan B?
Put it up again.
Sounds like a legal question.
You know, but I think it would be a better option because there's so many people that are
But-
against the
but every-
stormwater runoff fee because they don't see any result from it.
Right.
So then-
Kind of like myself
have to
is
accrue those
looking at my
funds.
properties that I pay this every single month on all my properties that I'm never sitting done with it. At least a sales tax, you could go, okay, we pay the sales tax, at least it can go somewhere.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
maybe that'd be a better option to get approved to continue down this road.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my view, a tremendous strength that Hutchinson has is that we're really good at tourism. And so for all the transients that come through the city, now we're able to collect off of that. If they're driving on our roads, now they're at least paying a portion back to the city that we could use for road maintenance. So let's try to find more ways to get people here, find more ways to get people to move here. But that's a real beauty of the sales tax is you catch all that transient traffic, or at least a portion of if they spend money here. So, but Plan B, Councilmember Richardson, is status quo with what we've been doing every year. Rat race, make cuts. at some point it would be a level of service component to that of what do we want to forego. Even with all of our peer cities, just have them pulled up here. Some have a zoo, but they don't have a nature center. They have a convention hall, but they don't have a sports arena. So you kind of look at all the tangible assets we have relative to our peers, and we certainly have more. So that's kind of where the discussion on Memorial Hall was born. And then even trying to right size our traffic signals and trying to remove some. Obviously we got pushed back on that. But again, it's like this graph of how do you squeeze the two together. We're always asked to, at least from the public side, to make cuts. Okay, well, we're trying to make cuts, but whenever we propose something, it's no. So, we'll continue to exhaust all avenues of trying to find ways to eliminate the waste. But that's certainly where a lot of that comes from, is squeezing those two over time. Make those incremental cuts.
Well, I have two remarks. I think my interpretation of John's remarks is that we would have to align killing the stormwater fee with the passage of the sales tax, and that the passage of the sales tax, because it requires a public vote, it's kind of a moving target.
And the stormwater fee may have to go up if the sales tax doesn't go through.
Or be significantly revised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like that would be, as a voter, that would feel like a bait and switch.
That's the reality we're in.
No, I know, but I'm saying that, like, if you don't pass this, we're going to raise your fees anyway. I don't know. It is what it is, obviously. But the other thing is, we've talked about 4.5% raises for staff. I think the fact that I emailed you a couple weeks ago, the fact that we still have jobs that we're posting that pay less than $18 an hour is a shame. All of our jobs should be paying a livable wage. We sit here and we hear presentations from the United Way about Alice and what's a livable wage in Reno County, but yet we're posting a job that pays less than $18. And it was something in some kind of clerk, but I don't think we should be doing that as a city. As people say they want to work here, I know our benefits aren't cheap. Nowhere has cheap health insurance. If they did, we'd all go work there. But that raise for our workers is definitely something that we want to keep.
I appreciate that, and I will say I've been working with Renee, and we have a consultant helping us doing a pay study on what our employees should be making, taking into account what they actually do in addition to like what's on the job description. So we're really trying to tackle that. And a lot of the things that either it was negotiated with the unions or operated outside of it, but having like certification pay. So as they progress in their training and education, we provide them more money. So that's a way that they can grow even outside of the normal performance review period. So anyway, I thought there's a lot of things we're trying to do to tackle that. So, but I agree with where your heart is at on that.
Thank you. Any final remarks from council? Questions for Mr. Villegas or staff? This item does not require,
Just feedback.
yeah, thank you.
Is there any feedback that you were looking for that you haven't gotten as of this evening?
No, I'm sure we'll have communications as well, kind of leading up to the next meeting. But generally, is this a good approach to continue to proceed with? Anything else you want tightened up, or just any fleeting thoughts, I guess, from you all?
I think we'll know public opinion tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Work
But
in a prison and walk to prison, 600 employees.
yeah, what homework do you need for us, considering that our budget's due in 2 meetings? Or Angela, if you want to weigh in, what should we be
Yeah, because we're
thinking about or reading up on, prioritizing?
I think we need to know, like, if you're tonight, there's no way we're raising the mill. There's no way we're going after the sales tax. We would definitely want to know sooner than later, because then we're going to have to go back and look at what cuts of service we're going to have to make. And we would need guidance on that as well, so.
Tonight?
If there's no way we're increasing taxes, no way we're going after the sales
If you're not
tax, we would.
open to the discussion of it.
Yeah, if you know in your heart right now, not happening, just, we need to know that it's not happening. That way we can make adjustments. And sorry, Public Works, but to get us out of the hole of something we could reasonably stomach, would be to not do arterial street maintenance for 26. Arterial street maintenance, historically, our PCI rating, the bulk of all of our streets is in 60 to 80 PSI. Obviously, I don't want to do that, but if the answer is no, we're not raising anything, that would be the default.
I don't want to back off on maintenance of the city streets.
Would that require laying off anybody?
No.
Here we go, us 5 in the hole again.
You know, but I think in terms of just homework, though, it sounds silly, but just educating people on like revenue neutral, educating people on flat mill levy. Those two things get so contorted. And just, oh no, the city has exceeded revenue neutral. They're raising taxes. I mean, it's not necessarily true. Even if it's flat, that's not true. And so I think just educating people on the vernacular that local government uses is really a good homework piece that I try to do myself. And I went through and I was walking with a lot of our employees on this, and that really kind of helped them understand too. So I think if we can tell our friends and their friends can tell their friends and family, because the people that may not like this are our friends and family. And so I think just educating them on how all of this works is really good homework as well. So, and I'll try to do my part.
Is there a Schoolhouse Rock video for revenue neutral rate?
You know, that's come up so many times. So when I was originally doing like this math breakdown, I showed this to Jessica and Evan and many other staff members, and they're like, "Oh, it's like Schoolhouse Rock." So we'll probably put some video together, like showing all of this. So I think that's really good feedback as well. We can put it on our Facebook, and this is how it works. A little caveat in Kansas in case it gets picked up somewhere else. So
I think it'd be important for comparables to look at not only dollars, but how much percentage taxes the city gets for valuation of property and how that compares year over year. Because I guarantee you, based on mill levy and property valuations and what we've done over the last 4 or 5 years, the amount of tax percentage dollars we get for property valuation is a lot lower now than it was 5 years ago.
yeah, and there was actually one year it
Even
went
with the
down.
bump up.
Yeah, there was a year it went down. So that's why we need to be ultra aggressive too in our economic development pursuits to try to get that part of the equation bigger.
But I think a lot of it too is the county too. I mean, we're talking what we're talking, but the county, are they talking about something too?
They are.
That's a good point, because what everyone else does seems to come back on us either
Right.
way.
I talked with Randy Partington and this today at the event that she was talking about, that Amy Holloway lady. He said that he believes council is advised to stay flat. So there's going to
Flat
be
mill or flat neutral?
flat mill. So
Okay.
All right. Well, good enough to move forward, and we'll continue hammering away at this. So, appreciate
Thank you
everyone.
for all the efforts.
Yeah, thank you.